And yes, I do feel that I've cut out the bullshit, if that makes sense. I've cut out the noise, and I'm focusing on improving South Africa. I'm just continuing on my journey with more information, and knowing how the system works and knowing how evil mainstream media can be, running after, a headline and clickbait to generate revenue for their shareholders. And also that if you truly want a friend in politics, that you should get a dog. um,
So the Dan Flow is all about human stories and the insights from the experiences and knowledge we can gain from that, and maybe gleam a little bit into human consciousness. Renaldo Gouws, I want to say welcome to the Dan Flow.
How's it, Dan? Yeah, thanks for having me. Time flies. I mean, when last did I think it's more than a year ago that we have had our interview for Truth Report.
Yeah, I think it's something like 9 months, 8-9 months.
Oh, it feels like a decade. So that's great to be here and great to be in your conversation.
I think just to sort of lead us in here, there's obviously, you always have a lot to say. I know that. And I know I could just put this in autopilot and tell you, Renaldo, take it away. And you'll be able to just talk to this, an hour and a half, 2 hours, how many ever I give you. But I'd actually like for us, and obviously some of this will involve politics because that's part of your life. But as I said at the onset here, this is about human stories. And so I want to delve into who this Renaldo Gouws is behind the political persona. So obviously, from a political perspective, you have a job to do. There are things that you need to achieve. And that means that you have to be confrontational, for instance, where, I think I said before, that's not necessarily the way that you interact with your dogs or with your wife or parents or anything like that, right? So I'm going to scratch a little bit beneath the surface. You originally came from Uitenhage, so Kariga now.
Yeah, actually dispatch, because what you just said is very insulting. Because there's a massive rivalry between Uitenhage and dispatch, so you never must make that mistake again. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, so I was born in Uitenhage because dispatch didn't have a hospital, but I grew up in dispatch, and then I went to high school in Uitenhage. Because as is always the case with me, I have to have. Yeah, Brandwag. That's right, in Uitenhage. And yeah, I mean, two lovely little towns. Rassie Erasmus, Danie Gerber, and Poete Himan. There's so many rugby players that come from Dispatch and the surrounding areas. So very proud of where I come from. And it's a proper little town where you could play touch rugby in the streets, and then you knew you had to go home when the street lights came on. So very, very great upbringing and experiences as a child in Dispatch, and then in high school in Uitenhage.
Then if just sort of still sticking around in those formative years, let's say high school and growing up between Dispatch and Uitenhage, did you can you sort of pinpoint something from there or recall a story that you look at today and realize that was an important part of a foundational realization about yourself that has actually brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I will say obviously that, the Dispatch in Uitenhage, I would say, is a very blue-collared town, and I don't think anybody will feel insulted by that because of Volkswagen and Goodyear being the two major factories in Uitenhage. And then it's about 40 kilometers from Nelson Mandela, from Port Elizabeth, Aberga as it's known now. And yeah, I mean, I think that my passion for people came from my formative years in Uitenhage and Dispatch, because there's a lot of people that had issues, people that lived below the breadline, and people that needed assistance and help. And you would see this in school when people would come and then they might not have lunch or they might not have something for break. and also just the type of conversations that were had, during school break. And I always had a need to listen and to try and give advice and assist people. I know that looking back now, thinking a 16 or 17-year-old wanting to give advice to somebody, but I mean, it's your fellow, it's a friend, it's somebody that's going through it with you. And there was always this stigma attached to dispatch and Uitenhage. And especially if you're a youngster, you are hypersensitive to what other people think of you. So, we grew up in that time where a trip to Port Elizabeth wasn't, a weekend journey. It's something that you could do on your own just by getting in a car and going. So there definitely was this sort of sense of you having to prove yourself if you're from a smaller town. And I came to Port Elizabeth a lot because I was fascinated by, the city life. I was fascinated by globalization. So I would definitely say that the fact that I grew up in a small town with ambitions to, see the bigger world and not wanting to live in a small town for the rest of my life, and then my interactions with my friends and people and the struggles that they had definitely, I would say, assisted me in understanding that I was definitely going to go into a field that was either going to assist people one-on-one or to try and improve the conditions for people at a community level. So, yeah, definitely that played a part.
So I understand what you're saying, that there's growing up around people who didn't always come from means. You're saying blue collar, and someone loses a job in the family, now suddenly don't have shoes for school, and you have all kinds of hardship, and you saw that and realized that can't we make this a little bit better? But also growing up in an environment like that means that you encounter a little bit of rough and tumble, I'm guessing.
Oh, yes.
And that
And it
then you had
makes
to
you a
learn
better
to,
person.
yeah, I mean, you had to learn how to stand up for yourself and speak back and speak your truth and take the fight and take the punch if you have to.
Yeah, I mean, with me, like, I mean, I was very, very skinny in high school. I wasn't bullied. I wouldn't say that I was bullied. I don't really think that there were that much bullying in high school, but there were moments where people tried to outshine one another and try to embarrass other people. And in that situation, it's where because I didn't have actual physical strength to the extent of, a first team rugby player, I would just use the intellect, and I would try and get out of a situation by saying, well, if you want to punch me or hit me, then I'll make sure that you get detention, and everybody will know what you did. So it was like a psychological way of getting myself out of being clubbed. Not that it happened often, not that there were any type of bullying at Brandwag. But I mean, it's high school. You've got a bunch of testosterone fueled adolescents and people that want to prove themselves, not really knowing what to do. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that I used my brain rather than brawn in those instances to get out of a club.
Yeah, no, it's certainly useful if you can talk your way out of things. And it
Well,
is rough.
especially with a gladde back like mine, So
Yeah, and eventually we can see sort of full circle why it makes sense in the bigger picture, some skills that you maybe acquired there that have come in useful.
Definitely.
So, as I understand, you started, and people first came to know you as a bit of a YouTube star. And you started that channel in 2009 while you were still studying, correct? I think the year before you finished or something.
Yeah, so no, I think I started my I opened a YouTube profile, I think in 2007, and I uploaded my first video in 2009. But I was very intrigued with social media because that was, I would say, 2006, 2007 is when social media really hit South Africa, and I think the world. I think we might have been a year, maybe a year and a half behind. But yeah, I mean, I jumped onto social media, Facebook, where you still had to get an invite from somebody that was on Facebook. I remember those days. I was on MySpace. I knew that there was something big coming, and I knew that this could be used as a tool um, to get the word out there, regardless of whatever the word might be. Whether it was fame that people were chasing, or whether it was to relay a message. I could see that social media was going to be the future of how people communicated. So I jumped on all of the social media, but eventually, because of agitation and irritation, I started making videos on YouTube because it was like my form of a diary that was just public to the world. Um, and my YouTube channel didn't initially start off as a channel that was going to talk about politics. It was going to just talk about life as a South African and, things that, because back then it was like show and tell. Social media initially, I mean, Instagram still is, and most of social media still is
Look what
show
I
and
got.
tell on a whole new level. But back then it was mostly because people have to understand the communication with the international community was very limited in the late 90s and early 2000s. There wasn't really, I mean, you could Skype and you could have conversations one-on-one, but you couldn't really communicate with a massive audience of people from a different country. So I used my social media as like hey, look, I'm a white guy in South Africa, because we all know the misconceptions that many people had, that, Africa is just, black individuals, not really white South Africa or white people in South Africa or Africa. And I started talking about that, and just gradually the politics flowed into the conversation, because of the fact that, we lived in a country with a very troubled past, and also a present at that time that was just as troublesome, with, people like Julius Malema singing Kill the Boer, Jacob Zuma becoming the president of the country. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting how so I suppose like you said, this is sort of a journaling experience for you as it started, just my life as a white South African at this time.
Mm,
And
mm,
eventually realized, but a large part of the truth of your life is political. And so it became more like that. As
mm.
journaling is a powerful way to get to the truth. I know that your wife actually brought out a devotional journal thing that she's a graphic designer, if I've got it correct.
Mm.
And so this idea of sitting down in the morning and you have like a page, here's a little verse from the Bible, a little something to think about, and here's some space for you to write down your thoughts, and sort of
Mm.
goes to that journaling thing as well. So it seems like it's
Mm. Yeah,
fine.
what I find interesting is, sorry to interrupt, but what I find interesting is the when I started the YouTube channel, I was really not that aware of politics, in the sense of me joining politics and becoming part of it. I was still studying psychology. I wanted to help people on a one-on-one basis, and or move into the business environment where I could assist the business and its human capital. And it's through that I realized that the problem in this country is far greater. I mean, if I could, take a corporate job and, earn a good salary anywhere in the world, but I was passionate about South Africa and its people, and I was concerned where this country was headed. Considering that we came out of a very troubled past, and then I'm seeing, okay, well, we've got people singing songs about killing people based on their ethnicity or culture. And we have a president in Jacob Zuma that just does not care about the law and doesn't think that the law applies to him. And ultimately, that made me go, okay, well, maybe there's something bigger here for me. Maybe I can make a change on a provincial level, on a municipal level, on a national level. And that is then how I got interested in politics, and how I decided to join politics, is because of the YouTube channel, and because of a lot of people asking political questions. When I made a video about South Africa, they would say, well, what is the crime like? What is the people like? How is your government? So it's actually the people that watched my initial YouTube videos when I started that actually made me interested in politics, because I realized that we had a lot of issues in this country. And then I started speaking about the issues, and more people tuned in. So that's where that all started.
So in a way, you didn't really choose politics. You chose the truth, and then politics dragged you in. It chose you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody I say this with a qualifier. I don't think most people that have studied to go into the private sector ever think that they want to get into politics, because it's firstly a very dirty game, and secondly, if it's very frustrating. It's very long hours. It's frustrating. We know how people feel in this country about politicians, and you learn to not take it personally, because I even agree with the viewpoint that most politicians are in it for themselves, or in it for some benefit to them or their families. And ultimately, that is what South Africa has turned into. And we can argue, whether or not South Africa has got this special type of classification for politicians that see them as celebrities because of people like Nelson Mandela and various politicians throughout South Africa's history, Oliver Tambo, et cetera, that has made politicians like the rock stars. Like where the United States, you've got your country music singers, you've got your pop stars, you've got your movie stars. And in South Africa, that is politics, and that's Nelson Mandela, that's F.W. de Klerk, Helen Zille, et cetera, et cetera. So I think a lot of people have become interested in politics because they see it as a way for them to become popular or famous or very, very wealthy. And for those that actually do want to do the work and just want to improve the country, you're facing those people and the idiocy that it comes with. Because if you look at politics in South Africa, most people that earn a salary that is far higher than the average median for a salary in this country, those people would never ever get the salary in the private sector. So that is why you see so many incompetent people in political leadership roles, because you don't need to be intelligent, you don't need to be loyal, you don't need to be good at your job. You can just be somebody that sucks up really well and is a good cadre, and then you'll ensure that you get a good salary.
And you added in loyal there. Maybe that's the only thing you need to be, is to be loyal to whatever clan or group is giving you access to that. Let's say power is actually giving you access to that responsibility.
The currency for you to keep your job in politics is to have loyalty, and for some it's blind loyalty, and for others it's loyalty that comes with terms and conditions as long as it benefits themselves. And then ultimately you've got people that are there because they actually believe in what the organization and the party stands for, and then to bridge it out from there. But yeah, I mean, I would say when I started my YouTube channel and when I got interested in politics, and I don't mind mentioning the political party. I mean, when I joined the Democratic Alliance in 2012, it was really a movement that I could see that if South Africa had this political party in charge, it would be a better country. So yeah, I mean, I looked at other political parties, and the one that, as a young white South African that considered himself centrist, it made 100% sense that I joined the Democratic Alliance when I did in 2012.
Yeah, I know there's the old saying, if you're not a little bit on the socialist side in your 20s and a little bit on the conservative side, somewhere in your 30s or 40s, like.
Yeah. So the saying actually goes, if you're not liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. If you're not conservative when you're old, you don't have a brain. And I can attest to it. It definitely is true, because I had a very liberal bleeding heart when I was in my late 20s and early 30s. I was definitely like, why should somebody that is the owner of a business earn millions and the workers should only earn a pittance of that? And once you realize, oh, tax kicks in and VAT and all of these things and the risk you take when you open a business, it's things that a lot of young people don't think of. And we can see it now. A lot of people are complaining about Elon Musk being the first trillionaire, and they are literally attacking him and saying that he should give, his money away. But what they don't understand is the risks that were taken and how much time he spent away from his family and from other things that he could have been doing. But yeah, ultimately, the saying is true. People find their way to conservatism the older they get. And I'm, I think my speed run was just a little bit quicker than most. Because I'm in my early 40s now, and I'm finally, I would say I'm ideologically, I'm at exactly where I need to be right now, and I don't see myself moving from here.
Yeah, so you're mentioning Elon Musk. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that he doesn't have that money. He just basically has the privilege to allocate it. And in terms of capital allocation, you look at what he's done before, you say, well, he seems to be a guy who knows what to do with the money. Like he puts it in the right places and develops the technologies. And that's a sort of some serious capitalism in action.
But here's the thing. I read a very interesting article this morning about it. And what they said is that the trillionaire status, like you said, doesn't mean that there's this money in the bank account. This is the money that people have valued his companies at because of them valuing him and his technology and what he has brought to mankind. So, it's the faith that people put in him and his companies that has made him worth what he is. And I think it's a fair assessment. I mean, I saw that it jumped up. He's worth 1.4 trillion now. So he might be the first, 2 trillionaire in the world. But I think, if you look at the companies, if you look at Neuralink, that helps people where like traditional medicine can't anymore. It's technology. It's a chip they plant in your brain and allows you to communicate and move things with your mind. That adds tremendous value to mankind. It allows people, like to give a South African example, this could have been something that could have assisted US van der Westhuizen, planting a chip in and allowing him to communicate when he couldn't anymore. And then you've got SpaceX, that is literally given us Starlink, allowed people anywhere in the world to be able to communicate with one another. And also, for people that might not have been able in an emergency situation to connect or speak to people, now they can. So once you look at all these things broadly and not just from a politically tinted lens that is either pro Elon Musk or anti Elon Musk, if you look at what he has done to push mankind forward, I think there's no doubt that he is worth every single cent that they say that he's worth.
No, I agree that he's unlocked tremendous value. I think I want to just sort of roll back a little bit. You were talking about sort of being more liberal and then moving towards conservatism. I understand that you've got 2 dogs, Kennedy and Carter, clearly named after famous American Democratic presidents. So
yes,
my question is, if you get a dog again, are you going to call him Reagan?
No, we've already just joked about to say if we get another Boston. The reason also is because Bostons are seen as the American gentleman. So we named them after American presidents, and Lauren loves the Kennedys. I don't think it had so much to do with their politics. It more had to do with the names. And my wife chose it, so we joked that if we have another one, we'll call them Trump. And I know that'll cause a lot of havoc, but no. We love. It's actually Carter's birthday today. He's 9 years old today. So thanks for bringing it up, and happy birthday to Carter.
Oh, happy birthday, Carter. So just sort of quickly stepping back in time again, you were saying around 2007 you started looking at YouTube. 2009 started posting. 2012 joined the DA. I believe it's 2014 married Lauren. And then somewhere around there, so I tried to work the math, get all the details. I think it's almost a year after that you became a ward councillor, something like that. And then you had
Yeah,
a term, and then
I
you had a
became
second term again.
Yeah, so I became a ward councillor in 2016 with the 2016 municipal elections, but I became a PR councillor first. So for those that don't understand, there's a ward councillor where you are in charge of a specific geographical area in a municipality or town or a district, and you are responsible for the residents that fall within that ward. Whereas a PR councillor is a proportional representative councillor, which can be moved anywhere in the metro. And most of the time, a PR councillor tries to shadow an opposition ward councillor. So if the ward councillor is, let's say, an ANC councillor, then a PR councillor from another party would also be in that ward. Obviously not the ward councillor, but try and see if they could assist, the people in that area, or they can be moved anyway. So, and that also, so just let me know if I'm over explaining, but I do think it's
No,
important
please.
that your average South African understands this. When it comes to removing a ward councillor, it's a lot more difficult than removing a PR councillor, because the PR councillor serves at the behest of the political party. And it's the same for a ward councillor, but the ward councillor also serves at the behest of the residents, because they were the ones that were put there by the residents. So if a political party wants to get rid of a councillor, then the fact on whether they are a ward councillor or a PR councillor is very important, because if they get rid of a PR councillor, they can just get rid of them and replace the councillor without having to go into a by-election. If they replace a ward councillor, then they have to go back into a by-election, and all the political parties can contest for that ward. So I became a PR councillor in 2016, and I was actually, it was a strange situation, because of the ward councillor being also an MMC, which is a mayoral committee member, meaning that he sat on a specific portfolio and was the head of that. I then shadowed as the PR councillor in his ward in his absence. And then 2 years later, when he decided that he was going to go rather into the private sector, I stood for a by-election for that ward, and then I won that ward. I think it was 93.5% or 94%. Won that ward on behalf of the DA, which is Ward 2 in Nelson Mandela Bay. It's the tourism, I would say, the tourism ward of Port Elizabeth. It's the beachfront.
94 is a quite fairly serious vote of confidence. You must have done a couple of things to impress people up until that point.
Yeah, so I mean, I can't be arrogant and say, yeah, people just voted for me, for Renaldo. But I mean, I was standing on the DA ticket, so I think that they obviously also had a big part to play at the time. People voting for the party, and then some people voting for me. So yeah, I mean, it was a great result, and I remained a councillor until 2024, when I then became a member of parliament, because I applied to become a member of parliament. So yeah, I served for 8 years. I would have served for a full 10 years if I didn't decide to apply to become a member of parliament. And then I would have probably have stood for another term as a councillor, with the hope of becoming an MMC. Because, I think any relatively young councillor, specifically if they're a ward councillor, I don't think you can do more than 2 terms as a ward councillor, because it is really, really draining work, especially with the way in which metros are run in South Africa. And I think a lot of people know the state of Nelson Mandela Bay. It might not be as bad as Joburg, but it is really, really terrible. I mean, I think I've lost count of how many city managers we've had in Nelson Mandela Bay. The last time I could record was 12 or 13 in a 2-year time span, and no metro can function like that. So my ambition was to either go to parliament or to the provincial legislature, or then to at least be in a high-ranking role where I could change or lead a department in order to improve it as a mayoral committee member. So that was the ambition. And then we all know what subsequently happened. I don't know if you want to get into that now or if you want to get into that later.
I think it's give it a couple of seconds there. Let's not spoil the story for those who don't know it yet. But just talking about this, sort of talking about mayoral committees and what ward councillors actually do and what the PRs who shadow them and who might shadow mayoral committee members, and how does all of this, just as someone, I don't work in this. I've never been in politics. So I sort of hear these things, you quickly read an article and you have some kind of idea in the back of your head what it looks like. But you were saying it's quite grueling work, like you probably couldn't do for more than 2 terms. What does that work week look like? What are the kind of challenges that you face? What's the kind of, what level of politicking causes disruption in those meetings to make things flow, and how much of it is just brute incompetence or it's just too difficult?
Okay, so let me explain this as best as I can to try and just exemplify the load of work and also the absolute incompetence and dire straits of the municipality. So I'll start off with the municipality. So any ward councillor is only as good as the officials that work at the municipality. And an example of this is, let's say there's a burst water pipe that needs to be fixed. What a councillor's role is, a councillor is the conduit between the residents and the municipality. So if the residents tells the councillor there's a massive pipe burst, instead of them contacting the municipality, the councillor already has the right people's contact details to contact to fix that. And then what should happen in a functioning municipality is the resident contacts the councillor immediately contacts the official goes out and fixes it, and it's done. Now, in Nelson Mandela Bay and many metros across South Africa, the residents will see the pipe burst, they will contact the councillor will then try and get to the official, then the official doesn't answer, then he'll try a different official, they won't answer, then he'll eventually phone the call center just as a normal resident can do. Then he will try and tell the person on the call center that he's actually a councillor or she's a councillor and that they need assistance urgently. And then unfortunately, it just all breaks down from there. So a councillor is only as effective as the official that is supposed to assist them. Now, you could use also service providers, people that should cut the grass in parks, people that should fix the streetlights. Because as much as people want to blame councillors for everything that might be going wrong, ultimately, people also need to know that a councillor can't physically go and fix a streetlight. A councillor can't physically go and do the work of the municipality because they could get fired. Because in the Municipal Systems Act and Structures Act, it makes it very clear that a political representative can't interfere with the job of the municipality. So I can't go and instruct an official. I can't tell an official, you have to go there and fix this right now, because then you can lose your job as a councillor. So it's very, very technical in the responsibility that you have as a councillor versus the actual power that you have. But just think of your average dysfunctional municipality or city, and then I will explain to you the average day of a councillor. By the time a councillor wakes up, if they are worth their salt, then they'll be awake by 6 o'clock already. When they do that, then they'll open their phone, and my average day was by 6 o'clock, I would already have had about 15 WhatsApp messages, either complaining about a pipe burst or a substation that tripped. And then I will phone the official. They won't answer. I'll send them a WhatsApp. They'll blue tick me. Then I will eventually phone their executive director, which is their boss. And then they will promise me that they'll do something about it. And then a couple of hours later, still nothing. But then in that interim, I will go to the office. I'll probably have 50 emails from the day before 50 new emails of complaints. Then all the while during the course of the day, I would say on average, every half an hour, you get about 2 phone calls that last about 5 minutes each, where a resident is either complaining or they're wanting to, tell you what to do. Then this is just your political. No, sorry, this is just your actual counselor work. So the average work it goes on during the day, but your hours is definitely not a 8 to 4 or an 8 to 5. Your working hours is whenever there's an issue, you'll be notified. So if there's a power outage at 1 o'clock in the morning, the residents are going to phone you and WhatsApp you. They're not going to leave you alone until 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock the next morning. So you are literally on 24/7 standby. But then also your working hours is up until 9, 10 o'clock at night when most people go to bed, maybe 11. And yeah, like I used to wake up with dread in the mornings because of the dysfunctional metro that we have, that I would have slept through a power outage, and people would be upset with me that there's no power and why didn't I communicate? Because I made it my mission to communicate effectively. If I couldn't fix the issue because of the administration that was lacking, I could at least keep people informed as to why it has not been fixed or as to why they have a power outage or no water. So that is the counselor, and there's many other examples, but then there's also the political party work. So besides the fact that you have to be available 24/7, you also have to campaign for your political party, and most of that also happened after hours and on the weekends. If you speak to a ward councillor or a councillor right now, it's literally hell for them, because besides the fact that they have to run a ward and sit on their committees and do all of that, they also have to campaign for their political parties for this election. So the life of a politician is definitely not as glamorous as what people think it is. And then added to that, it's very, very stressful, especially if you're working in a dysfunctional municipality with incompetent people that are put into positions because of their loyalty to a specific political party.
And I suppose what makes it difficult and why it takes a special kind of person, especially as you say, if you want to do it right, is that you do everything right that you possibly can, you're still going to get a lot of hate, right? It's not going to stop. There's still always going to be people who feel that you are responsible for, the electricity that went out at 1 o'clock at night or whatever.
And that is something that social media, sorry, there's obviously a delay, so I don't mean to speak over you, Dan, I'm sorry. But I would say that this is where social media prepared me for, being a politician, because even on social media, you'll get people that will just attack you or have negative things to say. So YouTube definitely helped me in getting a thicker skin for politics. And once I was in that groove, it's like you can literally throw anything my way and it won't be an issue, because I wouldn't take it personally. And even today, people will come and say the most weirdest, outrageous things, and I'll just go, thank you, all good, God bless you.
Why not? So Renaldo, you were saying you studied psychology. I know you ultimately did your master's. It was probably about 2010 or so, finished your master's in industrial psychology. And so from that lens, from that perspective, using the thinking that you acquired at that point, looking at a municipality and saying, how would you go if, and I mean, I know so little about politics, I don't even know if this would help, but let's say if they decided to make you mayor of Keiberga, of Port Elizabeth, what would you do to fix that? How would you fix making sure that you've got the right municipal manners and so like managers? What would you actually do, like step by step?
So, I mean, look, let's hope that I don't become the mayor, because I don't think I'm qualified to be the mayor. But what I can tell you is I am better than the current few mayors that we've had in Nelson Mandela Bay. And, I will give credit. I mean, Retief Oudendal would be a brilliant mayor, but it's not one person that runs a municipality. It's not one person. As much as the person is the mayor, they need a very good team around them in order to function well. So, I mean, initially where I would start is I'll make sure that the team that I've got around me are competent people that want to improve the metro. But just to explain it very briefly, the very first thing that I would do is I would do a skills audit internally of the municipality to, get rid of people that were put there because of their loyalty to a political party. I'll check if their credentials are right. I don't want anybody to work against me and the administrative staff. I don't expect them to love me. I don't expect them to just follow me for no reason. But I don't want people to work against me. And I believe that was the biggest mistake. And I say this with all the respect I have for Athol Trollip. I think the biggest mistake that Athol made was that he trusted the administration too much, because he was the first DA mayor ever in Nelson Mandela Bay. And to think that you would just be accepted by administrative staff that were handpicked by the ANC, it was never ever going to work. So the way that I would approach it is do a skills audit, get rid of the incompetence, get rid of the loyalists, and then get people that want to fix the metro, people that don't want to align politically, because you don't want people that want to be politicians to be at the administrators. You want administrators to be the administrators. So that's the first thing that I would do. And after you get rid of the incompetence, I would, in Nelson Mandela Bay specifically, I think that it's actually criminal that we haven't marketed ourselves as the cheaper alternative to Cape Town, with just as a good time as what Cape Town can offer. We are a 15-minute city. You can travel from the one side of Port Elizabeth to the other side of Port Elizabeth in 15 minutes and maybe 30 minutes during peak time traffic. And if you live in Joburg and if you live in Cape Town, I mean, that is a massive selling point. I mean, people spend almost a quarter of their day just on the roads in those cities to go to and from work. So there's also, so much beauty in Nelson Mandela Bay that we could easily, through tourism, make this city thrive. The money that could be generated just through tourism alone would equal, if not surpass, that of the motor industry in Nelson Mandela Bay. So that would be a easy first goal for me, is just to promote Nelson Mandela Bay and make it more attractive, and actually spend money on telling people why they should rather come to us than to KZN or Durban or, George or Plet or Cape Town. And added to that then is the big issue is infrastructure, because I would make sure that the budgets that we spent. The biggest issue in Nelson Mandela Bay was that a lot of the budget would go unspent, and then it would be returned to Parliament. It would be returned to national government. And I think that is such a crime. That if people allow money to go back to national treasury, then they should immediately be fired, because it means they didn't do their job right. So just by getting the administrative side sorted and making tourism a key aspect to Nelson Mandela Bay, we can bring unemployment down considerably. We can have a surplus of money that come into this metro, that we can take on bigger projects and fix massive infrastructural problems in Nelson Mandela Bay. But that is, if I was the mayor, and I'm not. So
yeah, no, I wanted to sort of have an idea, because I've heard a couple of people say, I think Rob Hersoff, who says, make me a benevolent dictator for 100 days or whatever, like, yeah, the things I'll do. We all have our ideas of what the issues are and what we think should be addressed in which order. And so just wanted to get your take on that.
And then
it also
the red
helps.
tape comes in play.
Yeah, plenty of red tape and bureaucracy to deal with. And it's pretty tough. So, I mean, you made this decision in your life. You said earlier, should we go there? I think, like you said, most people already know that part of your story. June 2024, you become DAMP. And not long after that, someone comes out with a terribly edited video that puts you in a very poor light. They later lost their license because of that, because of deceptive editing, right? But just like they say in Afrikaans, die koel was deur die kerk. The damage was already done, and so you had to step down because the DA didn't want you anymore. It took you, I mean, obviously, it takes a while before you make a decision, and you did make that move, and I know you are with the Freedom Front Plus at this point, but I mean, it must have been a hell of a year, because you build so much, like you say, 8 years of working with a municipality, of being involved politically. This is what you do. You actually, you create an identity around that as well. And so suddenly they go, sorry, buddy, how's your carpentry? What are you going to do for a living now?
Yeah. I mean, it was very hard for me to accept, and it wasn't necessarily because of the public outcry, because I mean, I knew that there were a lot of people that dislike me because of whatever view they have and how they see me. I'm under no illusions that I don't appeal to everybody. I can come across as very braggadocious or arrogant to people out there, but it's just because I'm so passionate about what I want to do and the change that I want to see and where I want South Africa to be. But the biggest disappointment for me was the way in which, after 12 years of being loyal to a political party, just to be thrown out like a used condom, because that's how I felt. And I wanted to make it as graphic because that's how I felt. Because for 12 years, I had to see how leaders and influential people in the party would say things that would cause a lot of havoc for councillors on the ground level, grassroots level, that we had to defend. We had to defend Musi Maimane making the outrageous statements that he did, Helen Zille with the outrageous statements that she did, etc., etc. And then after 12 years of defending the party, getting slapped around when the leaders made stupid decisions, then the one moment that I needed the party to defend me, because I think for most people, if you go and look at what IOL did and the smear campaign that was out there, I think it's obvious now that if you go and watch that video in full context, you will understand the point that I was trying to make. I wasn't being racist. Back then, the term was used by mainstream media outlets when they spoke about a racist incident. They actually used the physical word. And then times have changed, and people were judging me on today's standards by something that happened 14 years prior at that time. And not for 1 second did I think, look, I knew it was a big issue and I knew it was a massive smear campaign. But I was under the impression that the DA, having gone through that many times with Helen, with John, with various people in the DA, I thought that they would have my back, because it was a couple of months prior to that. I don't know if you remember the whole flag burning saga and how many people went absolutely crazy with the DA advert where they say they burnt that South African flag. And people were saying, that they should be charged for treason. And I had to defend the party, and I did, because, I didn't see it as treason. I saw it as them representing what South Africa will become if we don't step in. So with that in the back of my mind, I went like, okay, well, I know that this is going to cause massive inconvenience for the party, but, the party stands on values and principles and they will have my back. Yeah, ignorance is bliss, because then a 3-month investigation played out. And even though I didn't believe that I was guilty of what they were accusing me of, and just to make it clear, the DA accused me of not declaring this video to them when I stood as a councillor back in the day. And I've got evidence on email that I actually communicated with them about my YouTube channel, about, problematic videos that they picked up in the Young Leadership Program. So this was dealt with on multiple levels within the DA in 2012 and in 2013. So, and then the party had this clause, once declared, always declared, meaning that if a matter was dealt with, you don't have to declare it again in future elections if you want to stand. So ultimately, what it boiled down to is this FLC, which is the Federal Legal Commission of the DA. They investigated this whole thing for 3 months, and then they found me guilty of not telling the party about this video. About disclosing. However, even though I disagreed with that because I had the evidence, and I was already going, but you guys aren't telling the truth, because there were 3 people on the panel. There was 2 white individuals and 1 black lady. And ultimately with the verdict, what came out was, okay, you are guilty according to us, but you should remain as a member of parliament. You should be placed under whatever they called it for a year so that you don't transgress again and you don't do these things again, but you should remain as a member of parliament. And it was 2-1. So the white man and the black lady found that, there's no issue actually that I should remain. But they found me guilty. And then the one white lady was the one that had a big issue with me remaining in the party. And then she ultimately took it to FedEx. And the federal executive in one day overruled a 3-month-long investigation. And what is problematic for me is that the FLC is the Federal Legal Commission, which the federal executive and the federal council, which is the 2 highest bodies in the DA, they listen to what the FLC has to say because the FLC are experts. They are attorneys, they are lawyers, they do this for a living. So the fact that a 3-month-long investigation that found me guilty but said I should remain was overruled in one day by a panel of 15 people that really didn't have context as to what transpired, because I don't think after a 3-month-long investigation in one sitting you can explain why they were wrong and why you should overrule it. Ultimately, though, FedEx decided to terminate my membership. And to this day, 2 years later, I still do not know the reasons for them overturning that decision because they refused to share it with me. I've asked them, they flat out rejected. Then I went through the access to information, the POPI Act, and I'm still waiting for feedback from the organization that deals with these things. But the DA refuses to share the minutes of the FedEx meeting with me. So the question is why? If you are so convinced that you made the right call and you got rid of me and I was a liability and I broke the constitution of the DA, then surely it should be easy for you to share the minutes and just tell me why and on what basis you got rid of me. So I never got that. I still don't have it to this day. My opinion of it is that their donors approached them, or some influential donors approached them, because this all happened during the height of the negotiations in the GNU, which also, I find interesting. This video that when I was a councillor didn't feature, and when I became a member of parliament, then suddenly out of the blue just comes out of nowhere. To me, it's like strategic. And then, during these negotiations I believe, and I don't have evidence of this, but I've heard it from multiple sources within the DA, is that there were some high-ranking donors that donate a lot of money to the DA that said, get rid of him. He's a distraction. He's the bigger issue here is the DA and the GNU and how they can, change South Africa for the better. And I believe that. I believe that there were a lot of pressure that was put on to the DA to get rid of me, even breaking their own constitution to do so. And that is ultimately where we then ended up with. I mean, I was bitterly disappointed. I felt betrayed. And also, I felt that the people in the organization didn't try and stand up and defend me. And initially I thought, when it happened, I thought, I can understand why, people just want to look after their jobs. But, with time past, I mean, I considered these people in the organization my friends. more than just a colleague, because we bride together, we suffered together, and ultimately for none of them to speak out, I think that was also a hard pill to swallow. But yeah, I mean, that happened ultimately, and when my membership with the party was terminated, that led then to me losing my seat in Parliament. And a lot of people think that Parliament kicked me out. No, Parliament didn't kick me out. It was my termination by the DA that led to it. And also, I wasn't dismissed for racism. I wasn't dismissed for anything other than, according to them, not declaring the video or not bringing it to their attention when I have proof that I did it. So anyway, that is where that ended then.
Yeah, from what you're saying, it sounds like it was political expedience, perhaps during the GNU negotiations. You got thrown under the bus, and have to break a couple of eggs to make an omelet and all of that for the guys involved. But from your perspective, this is straight up betrayal. And like you say, 12 years of loyalty and of defending them and standing up for them, and then getting betrayed. I, not going to take too long a story on this, but my grandfather was involved in politics. And at some point, a whole bunch of his friends betrayed him. And I remember at his 80th birthday, he spoke about it and he started crying. Decades and decades later, it still hurt because, like you say, they're not just friends. These become, or just colleagues, they're allies, like you trust them to have your back because we all have each other's backs. That's why, we're a group party. So no, I mean, it's absolutely terrible. What got you through that time?
My family, the people that follow me on social media, like the people on YouTube, my subscribers, because I mean, for 3 months, I wasn't on social media. I couldn't post anything because of the processes that were unfolding. If I would say anything publicly, I would do myself a lot of damage. So, and I mean, the South African Human Rights Commission was also on my case, which I don't really want to touch on that because that's over and done with, and I think everybody knows who and what the Human Rights Commission is. But what I will say on the Human Rights Commission is that article dropped, let's say 4:00 in the afternoon. The next morning, they opened a case against me at the Equality Court in Nelson Mandela Bay. Now, because of one article, they rushed to open a court case against me. And then since then, there's been multiple occasions where Julius Malema has said outrageous things and people in politics saying racist things, and then just nothing from the Human Rights Commission. So there was clearly this massive internal rush to try and crucify me. And subsequently, they had to change their initial filing because more facts came out. The fact that the video was not doctored, but it was shortened, which is doctored.
Deceptive editing.
Instead of doing the honorable thing and saying, okay, we jumped this gun too quickly, maybe we should withdraw the case, they doubled down. And ultimately what happened with the Human Rights Commission is we both came to an agreement because, I mean, I don't mind sharing it. I appeared once in court, and that was just for when the court case was going to start. And up until we settled, I mean, that cost me R250,000. And imagine somebody losing their job, and then immediately it's told, oh, you're going to now have to fight this battle in court. And at that time, I felt so betrayed. I was in such a negative space that I was like, I'm not going to spend money that I don't have fighting a case when, there's this massive smear campaign. I would rather just try and meet with the South African Human Rights Commission, explain, what was my thinking, and hopefully, we can get to some sort of resolution. And that is what ultimately happened, but it still cost me R250,000. If I was going to go to court, that would have been at least 750,000 Rand to R1,000,000. And then you're not guaranteed of a fair trial because, of the way that it became massive news. Even the BBC reported on it. So I didn't know, whether you get a white judge and they felt pressure, or you get a black judge and they feel pressure. I wanted this nightmare to end because I know that, what was being said and portrayed about me wasn't me. It wasn't, who and what I am. But yeah, to get back to what you said about your grandfather, like, the thing that really gets to me is the betrayal by the organization. I don't really care about the position. I never ever cared about titles or positions. When I became a counselor, it was so weird when people just started calling everybody counselor, this, honorable member, this and that. And I said, my name is Renaldo. Even the staff, even the administrators would say counselor. I said, my name is Renaldo. You like almost double my age. Just call me Renaldo, please. And then the same with Parliament, when I'll never forget the very first flight when I landed and they had their bus there with the people, it was honorable member. And I was like, if you call me honorable member one more time, my name is Ronaldo. That's what you're going to call me. And then they said, no, we can't. And I said, well, I'm asking you, please, to just call me Ronaldo. The point that I'm making is, it is not necessarily about the salary, about the perks, about any of those things. I mean, yes, of course, listen, they're great. I mean, if you do your work really, really well, I think that you can justify earning that salary because of how much time you are away from home, the value that you are adding if you do your job right. So I wouldn't be like, if I was doing the work and I was putting in the hours, I wouldn't feel bad for the perks that I was getting, because I know in the private sector I could earn double or triple that amount. But what was really disappointing for me was how the political party and who I believe my friends were in the party ultimately treated me. Because it started off with them saying, oh, I can't believe that they're doing this to you. We all know the truth. But they always said this on one-on-one, and then none of them said anything, but everybody was like on my side, and then eventually when the outcome happened, then there were some people that said, oh, I can't believe this. I'm so disappointed in the party, but none of them did anything. So, words are cheap, um, ultimately. And I know what I would have done. And I think that the people that know me know that I would have made a lot of noise if I felt an injustice took place. I did that with Helen Zille when mainstream media and everybody went after Helen Zille after her colonial statements about Singapore and South Africa. I defended her. Like, many people in the party said, stay away from this. Don't touch this. She is going to get disciplined. You don't want to be drawn into that. And I said, no, because what she said is 100% accurate. And, what I got in return was a kick in the teeth by Helen Zille, which is actually very, very disappointing. But anyway, so the point that I'm just leading to is I didn't care too much about losing my position and the title and the salary and the benefits. I cared about the betrayal and the disappointment of having to deal with that, because that really cut very, very deep. So yeah.
Yeah. When you're talking now about the court proceedings, it reminded me of something I've heard a lot of people in England say, because they sort of have a little bit of a censorship problem at this point. Lots of people get arrested for, anything that's even remotely outside of whatever the Overton window at this point is, which seems to be drawing very narrow there. And a lot of them say they get arrested and then go through this and be put through the ring, and eventually they just let them go. And they say the process is the punishment.
Yeah.
And so, like, you don't have to be guilty. We just have to bring this against. Like, this is, it's more than enough. Like you say, like, you want to take it on, you want to fight it. Okay. You don't want to fight it. Okay. It's going to be hell either way.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hell of a process with it was supposed to be the happiest time of my life, because, as much as we can say about members of parliament, I believe it's still an achievement to be one of 400 people elected to represent 64 million South Africans. I still think that it's something that comes with a massive amount of responsibility. Unfortunately, we know that a lot of members of parliament don't understand the importance of that and who and what they are representing. But for me, it was a massive responsibility and a massive honor. So a time that I've worked, something that I worked 12 years towards, just in an instant got ruined by a person with an agenda. and then a willing mainstream media to jump on that and smear me left, right, and center, and then eventually a political party that didn't care enough to actually defend their values and principles. So ultimately, it just led to me having to trust on my family. My wife was an absolute superstar. My wife was a rock, because there was a couple of days where I really felt like I couldn't get out of bed. I just couldn't face the day because of, you going from such a high of having this massive responsibility and honor to the next day being literally the cretin of mankind in South Africa, because I used a dreaded word, and every single media house is now telling stories about me. It was very, very difficult, but it was my wife and my family and the people that, the close friends outside of politics, and my subscribers on social media that pulled me through that and just said, we know that you're not like this. We know that this is a smear campaign. So having that positivity of people seeing through it, because 2 years ago, I would still argue a lot of people had more faith in mainstream media than what they have today. I think the big swing with the question of mainstream media came when Donald Trump returned as the president for the second time, when he called out mainstream media unapologetically and said, look at the bias that they have. And of course, we know that mainstream media in South Africa also has a leftist slant. So they were definitely going to be against somebody that's a center-right individual with an opinion, specifically talking about Afrikaners and white people and race-based laws in this country. So ultimately, it just boiled down to, I wouldn't be here today with as much confidence as I have if it wasn't for my wife, who was my rock, my family, and my close friends outside of politics, and then, of course, my subscribers on my YouTube channel.
Well, I'm really grateful that you have such a great wife that could stand by your side at such a difficult time. And like you say, the friends, the dogs didn't get an honorable mention there, but
No, they just live their own lives. I mean, I vividly remember like the second day. You wake up in like a blur. It's almost like you don't know if you were asleep or if you're awake. But when you eventually wake up, you just get this dread. Like the best way to describe it is, if you ever had to go for an operation that is going to be something that's going to, put you out for 6 weeks, where, you won't be able to do work or you won't be able to do anything, and it's going to be painful afterwards. Now that feeling when you wake up the morning of the operation, that feeling of dread where it's like, oh, today is the day. I experienced that for 2 months. So imagine that. Imagine, lucky enough to fall asleep, and then you wake up, and then as you wake up, your first thought is like, okay, I'm waking up. And then it's like, oh, wait, this wasn't a dream. I am being taken to court by the Human Rights Commission. My membership has been terminated with my party. Oh, I am no longer a member of parliament. Oh, I don't know how I'm going to earn an income. So that was really, really hard. But with the support of the people on YouTube, with the support of some business people in Nelson Mandela Bay, it managed to just get me to a point where I just had to survive day by day, week by week, and then eventually month by month. And now I'm in a position where ultimately I feel more free than I've ever have in my entire life. And if you told me this when the shit hit the fan, I would have been, there's no way. There's no way that I would come out of this more confident and feel more free than I ever have been before. But here we are. And what a blessing. What an absolute blessing. Because also, I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to say the word shit, but I'll say it anyway.
Go ahead.
I'm very happy. I'm It's weird how things work, because, by the way, as we are recording this today, John Steenhuisen, the news broke that Jordan Hill-Lewis has requested that he be replaced as the Minister of Agriculture. So today is the axing day of John Steenhuisen as the Minister of Agriculture. And it's weird how 2 years ago around this time, he was the one that ultimately decided on whether or not I should remain in the party. So, I mean, I can look at this and go, oh, justice. No, I don't see it that way. I will never ever get justice for what happened to me, and I'm fine. I'm fine with that. I'm happy to move on with my life and just take on this next chapter that I have with the Freedom Front Plus. And ultimately, just the point that I was making is what a blessing in disguise, because what the DA has turned into over the last 2 years is unrecognizable. And you know, I thought initially that I had a lot of respect lost for me with what happened, but I do believe that if I was still with the DA today, I believe I would have had people would have lost a lot more respect for me because of what the DA has stood for. The problem is that it's difficult because you have to understand that people now, because I'm part of a different political party, and we can get into that. But because I'm with a different political party now, whenever I say something about the Democratic Alliance, people think, oh, bitter X. Or people think, oh, he's just a disgruntled former DA person. And it's like, no, because it's unfortunate that this happened during the period of time when they got rid of me and then they changed. But I do think that, somebody that is a loyal DA supporter, or just somebody that knows who and what the DA is, can look at the DA and go, this is not the same DA from before the 2024 elections. So ultimately, I hope that more and more people will just see that and, make the right call and vote with their values and principles.
Yeah, Ronaldo, I actually wonder for myself how much of that difference, how the party changed, has become more apparent to you. And that while you were there were maybe some things that you didn't realize was actually happening, and you're actually now in a place where you can better see. But I hear what you're saying about going through something absolutely terrible. You're saying it's probably the worst thing, one of the worst things that could happen to you. And in retrospect, you realize, oh, but that was actually a chrysalis. That was a transformation. It was a metamorphosis that you needed to go through. It's a door of pain that you had to walk through to be able to get to where you are now. And as you said, you feel more free than you ever have. And I think it's something you were saying people had specific titles that they were throwing at you, and you were saying, no, I'm just Renaldo. And that kind of insistence on not having the airs, it's a little bit of a rebellion, but it's saying, I want to deal with the truth. And I think we kind of started this podcast around the area of truth and of, journaling your way towards something and realizing, but this is what comes out of my heart and this is what's real. And I've got to defend and fight for this, even if it takes that courage to get there. And it feels to me like, and from what you're saying, that you feel like you're in a better position now to honestly represent that truth.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yes, I do feel that I've cut out the bullshit, if that makes sense. I've cut out the noise, and I'm focusing on improving South Africa. I'm just continuing on my journey with more information, and knowing how the system works and knowing how evil mainstream media can be, running after, a headline and clickbait to generate revenue for their shareholders. And also that if you truly want a friend in politics, that you should get a dog. um, but no, I mean, with that being said, there are some people that will be lifelong friends, but the overwhelming majority of people that you get to know in politics are either there for themselves, and if they are stuck between a rock and a hard place between choosing standing up for their friends or keeping quiet to secure their job, I mean, I to an extent, I can't blame them, but it's still disappointing depending on, what type of person you are. If you are the type of person that will stand up for somebody at the detriment of to yourself, then of course that hurts more. But if you're just a person that avoids conflict and don't want to get involved in anything, then that's probably a lot easier. But yeah, the journey has been very interesting. I'm very excited for the future. I took a break from politics for a year after the termination took place with the DA. And I didn't even know if I wanted to get back into politics, like I looked at it and I was like, well, I gave 12 years. I made a difference at a municipal level. I think I paid my dues. And then when I got back onto social media and the amount of support that I received from, people on social media, people that followed me and people that didn't follow me, it really made me go, okay, well, maybe I'm not done with politics yet. So then I looked at the different political parties, and there were various political parties that reached out to me as soon as my membership was terminated to say, please, consider joining our political party. What happened to you was wrong and not right. So instead of just jumping from one political party to another, like Liam Jacobs, um, I decided to look at the various political parties and also to take count of what I am and what I've learned from all of this. And it's weird because during that same period, Dr. Corne Mulder was now starting to become somebody that wanted to be the leader of the Freedom Front Plus. I listened to a lot of his speeches. I watched a lot of what he had done and what he has said. And I found that his approach to South Africa and his approach to politics was very similar to mine. Um, it's a passion that, it's not a job, it's a passion. And when he eventually became the leader of the Freedom Front Plus, I said, okay, I can get on board, with the Freedom Front Plus, because he's got a bigger vision for the Freedom Front Plus than I think what previous leaders had for the Freedom Front Plus. I think they were kind of happy with having the Afrikaner support or a portion of it, and just continuing down this path of being a conservative party that represents Afrikaners. But when Dr. Corne Mulder became the leader, he wants this party to be the party for all conservatives in South Africa. Of course, not taking away from the core, by representing Afrikaners and our culture, but to also be a voice for minorities in South Africa, a voice that is very much needed. If you look at the legislation in this country, and if you look at the songs being sung by other political parties in South Africa. So I decided to join the Freedom Front Plus after, I think it was almost to the day, a year after my membership with the DA was terminated. So I took time to make sure that, if I'm going to get back into it, I'm going to join a party that I truly believe that, will have my back and won't have an issue with me saying the things that I've been saying. Because a lot of people might not know this, but my journey with the DA was very much filled with a lot of stumbling blocks and a lot of stop streets and red robots and, trying to get me to change who and what I was, and trying to, that is why it was so confusing for me that, they were trying to change me consistently, but ultimately they chose me to go to parliament. And I'm like, I'm getting mixed signals here. On the one hand, you are saying that I'm causing problems for the party, but then you send me to go and be one of the highest representatives in the party. And ultimately, to this day, it's now been a year and a little bit that I've been part of the Freedom Front Plus. Not once has the leader or any senior leader in the party told me, Renaldo, you should not have said that. Renaldo, you should not have done that. In actual fact, what I'm getting is support. I'm getting support from the people on the ground. I'm getting support from the leadership structures. And I'm very blessed. I'm very, very happy where I am now. And I really hope that South Africans just take stock of their values and principles and start voting based on their values and principles rather out of fear. Because a lot of people for the last couple of elections voted out of fear or voted against a political party. Stop the ANC, vote for this party, or, help us become the majorities. Instead of, what is your values and principles? What are the things that you believe in? What is important to you besides service delivery? And then vote according to that. And I hope to, change minds leading up to this election, that people start voting for their values and principles, even if that means that they vote for a party that at the moment has got 1.2, 1.5% of the support, because ultimately the DA was also a 1% party in 1994. And with the advent of technology and social media, you can have a 1% party and in 4 years' time, it can become a 10, 20% party. I mean, look at, what is it, Reform UK. I mean, look at what they've done in the UK because people are returning back to their conservative values in the UK. And I think that South Africa is long overdue for that because 85% of this country is conservative because 85% of this country are Christians. And you have to be conservative to be a Christian. So I think if people just, look at their ideology and look at their values and principles, I foresee a massive change in the future of politics in this country. We are going to be coalition orientated, and coalition politics is the future of South Africa. And I think that the Freedom Front Plus has got a massive role to play there, specifically representing minority rights and the conservative voices in South Africa.
I really like making predictions about things, and mostly I turned out to be wrong about most of it. So obviously I have to work on my models. But Renaldo, I think this is roughly the place in the podcast where I'd ask you to share your socials or whatever, but I don't think I need to. I think people know you very well. I'll drop things in the description anyway. But I want to say thank you very much. I know you guys are busy with campaigning and sort of used more time than I planned to, but I really appreciate it. Thank you for being on the Dan Flow.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the great work that you are also doing. I want to say in closing, though, to everybody that is watching this, please ensure that you go and vote this election. I know that a lot of people think voting is a waste of time. It's not. It definitely isn't, especially in municipal elections when a PR vote can count so much, because a lot of people would think that, why should I go and vote in my ward? Because the ANC has got 80% of the vote in this, ward, or the DA has got 80%. Your vote still makes a difference on the PR ballot, because even though the ward will go to that specific individual, that 10% or 15% that voted for another party, that gets added to the total, and then that person and that party gets represented on the PR ballot. So it really is important to go and vote in this election. And secondly, I would implore people to start voting for their values and principles and stop voting out of fear or what is convenient or what is the biggest threat to the ANC, because we can see in the GNU that there actually is no threat to the ANC. What we thought and who we thought would be a threat to the ANC has now just adhered to their policies and implementing their state control and their policies. So that is what I would say in closing. But thanks, Dan, for the time, and thank you for this. I see this as like it was a very good psychological session. It was a counseling session almost to just let me reflect again on, what happened in the past and reflect and go, oh, wow, I actually have so much to be grateful for. I needed this. Thank you, especially with the registration weekend happening this weekend.
Excellent. That's great to hear, Renaldo. I hope it helped get some things off your chest. And it's always really important to remind ourselves of what we have to be thankful for, because you sort of get quagmired in the short-term things happening. Oh, this morning I had to do this, but where are you in your life? It's actually great. Thank you.
Shotbud, thank you. I appreciate it.